Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I'm Ed Lynch, alcoholic. Hi, Ed. I'm grateful to be here. I want to thank the committee for allowing me to come up here and share my experience, strength, and hope. And I want to thank the Dog on the Roof for accommodating me by schlepping my motorcycle up here so I can participate in a poker run tomorrow. And I want to thank Chuck for being a friend. And I want to thank my bride for beating hepatitis C and being here with me tonight. My sobriety date is April the 16th, April 17th, 1966. My home group is the Ash Attitude meeting in Excondido at 7 a.m. I go there 6-7 mornings a week, and my sponsor's Harry H. from Oceanside, and hope those things never change. And I think if I hang around Alcoholics Anonymous and do the things I've done up to this date, they won't. I haven't had a drink since my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, so it can be done as far as I'm concerned up until today. I came here on a nudge from the judge. April of 1966, I stood before Judge Hughes in Van Nuys, California. I was 31 years old. I weighed 135 pounds. I had no teeth, and I was so skinny. When I stuck my tongue out, I looked like a zipper. And I thought I was handsome. Thought that for a lot of years. And then Keith told me the truth. But what happened to me is I got sentenced to Alcoholics Anonymous. At the time, I was facing 7.5 to 15 years, and my attorney told me that I was going to go to the penitentiary again, and I was prepared to do that. But for some reason, the judge sentenced me to Alcoholics Anonymous. I had to go to 24 meetings. I had to get the court card signed, and I had to go to 3 meetings a week. And being the alcoholic that I am, I wanted to get those meetings over with, so I did all 24 in a row. And I haven't stopped going to meetings since. I still attend at least 7 to 9 meetings a week, and I find a nice comfort level in that attendance of meetings. I'm involved in Alcoholics Anonymous right from the beginning. I was told by my first sponsor, who I had for 32 years, that if you stay active in Alcoholics Anonymous, you don't say no to an AA request, and you do the things that they ask you, there's a chance you'll stay sober one day at a time. And that's what's been my experience. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the most important thing in my life. I adore my wife. I think she's the most beautiful woman in the world. But without Alcoholics Anonymous, I wouldn't have a Lori, I wouldn't have a life, and I know that. And I don't want to ever forget that. I want to remember where I came from. When I was brand new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I was 34th meeting. I heard some guy at the podium got up there and said, "Rarely have we seen a person in jail who's thoroughly followed our path." And for this alcoholic, that was good news. Then I heard some other old crank get up there and say, "Thoroughly have I seen a person fail who's rarely followed our path." And I thought, all right, I better get on this path and I better stay, because I didn't want anything I had before I got here. I had to give up a lot of things when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. One of them was waking up in the car in the morning, the roof of my mouth sunburned, I had to give that up, Another thing I had to give up is I used to go to a bar in Glendale called Dave's, and I'd be there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I just loved it. I had anticipation when I was going to go to that place, because I knew as soon as I opened the door, the aroma, the urine, the stale beer, the cigarette smoke. I just looked forward to that, you know. And when I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, they told me that, you know, I didn't have to do that anymore. And it was kind of nice. After a while, I got used to, you know, not putting myself in that position. And another thing, I remember when I used to drink and I go into Dave's and he'd take a look at me and he knew how to handle me if I was drinking or how to handle my drink in the morning. If I was okay and not too bad and I just needed that regular drink, which I always needed a drink in the morning, he would give it to me in a shot glass with a beer back. And if I was a little bit quick, he would take it and he would put it in an old-fashioned glass and he'd give me a half a beer for a back. And if I had the whips and jingles, he'd serve it with a towel. And what he would do is I'd put the towel around my hand, up over my neck, and I would pull that drink up there, see? And I got one or two of those, and then I'd get all inside, and I'd kind of throw that towel away because it's okay now, you know? And that's the way I drank, you know? And I had to give that up. I had to throw the towel in. Isn't that terrible, you know? Just said, here, can't do it anymore. But I didn't know how not to do it. And the people of Alcoholics Anonymous said, if you do what we do, you'll get what we get. And that goes for the slippers. If I do what the slippers do, then I'm going to slip. If I do what the winners do, I'm going to win. I was told all I had to do was change everything, and I had to surrender. And surrender wasn't in my vocabulary until somebody in Alcoholics Anonymous told me surrender means moving over to the winning side. And when I realized that, I thought, well, maybe I do have a chance. Maybe there's a chance that this alcoholic can stay sober one day at a time, for a long time. And you know, things happen. I got involved right away in a meeting up in Tujunga, California, called the Valley Lodge Annex. I went to my first meeting at a place called the Valley Lodge Annex. And what happened when I went there, a guy and his wife got up and split a pitch, and I thought, boy, I'm glad I only got to go to 23 more of these meetings, you know, because I didn't have a clue. In the second meeting, I was going to go back there, and I got a call. When I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I was a house painter. I was the worst house painter in the state of California. I was so bad I never got a referral. But I was quick. I was one quick painter. I had one guy, you know, I'd be over there painting, all of a sudden a brush would leave my hand. And I had a customer go over to his neighbor and bring him over to watch me. He says, I'm paying this guy, you know? So that's the kind of painter I was. So I'm getting ready to go to my second meeting, and I get a telephone call in the afternoon to go down and give a bid on painting a house down in Montrose. So I get in my alcoholic truck, which was a 1948 Dodge panel that I had cut windows in the side and put louvers in it so it could get air and get the fumes out. It had one seat, which was the driver's seat, and I had an orange crate on the other side. So if you rode with me, depending on how I drove was where you ended up in the car. And as I said, it was a 1948, and I owed 36 payments on this thing. So you know I had it all together when I got here, you know. Plus, when I had this paint truck, I had to always park it on an incline so that I could jump start it. There was something wrong with the starter. So I take this paint truck and I appear at this lady's house and I knock on the door, and this gorgeous redhead answers the door. She's just gorgeous, you know. She had red hair, she had blue eyes, and she had all her teeth, you know. See, the gals that were drinking with me at Dave's at 6 o'clock in the morning, they didn't have teeth. I had no teeth. And when we had a little romance or something and we'd kiss, it'd be like a plunger experience. So this gal, she just kind of, you know, did a lot of smiling. I did a lot of talking, told her all the colors I was going to match up in the house and just everything, all the wonders I was going to perform. And finally I looked at my watch and I thought, my God, I got to get out of here because I got to get up to go to that meeting and get that court card signed. So I said to her, I'll put a bid together and I'll drop it in your mailbox in the morning. I have a very important meeting I have to attend. I figured that sounded pretty good because I really needed that paint job. I had about 85 cents at that time. So she said to me, what kind of a meeting? Well, I'm not going to tell her I got to go to an AA meeting. My God, I need that paint job, you know. I didn't want to think some alcoholic was going to be painting her house, you know. God forbid, especially a quick one. So I said to her, I got to go to a meeting at the Valley Lodge Annex. She said, what kind of meeting is that? And I said, an AA meeting. And she looked at me, and with all those teeth, she just had a big smile, and she said to me, why don't you come to 4011 Dunsmore in La Crescenta? I'm leading the meeting tonight. Became a program of attraction rather than promotion. I immediately went home, got my best pair of paint pants out and pressed them. My best paint t-shirt, my new Dun & Edwards hat, and I showed up early. And she asked me to read chapter 5 at that meeting, and I never saw that much dialogue in my whole life. And being vain and having no teeth, the whole thing I did was really always when a person fails, you know. And when I got finished, those people in that room applauded. And I thought, well, they recognize talent. You know? I had no idea that alcoholics like to clap the way they like to clap, you know. I was at a meeting not long ago, a gal tripped, and they gave her a round of applause, you know. So I thought, well, I've arrived, you know. Here I am at this meeting, and these people are saying things like, keep coming back. I knew I had something they wanted, but I wasn't quite sure what it was, you know. It was probably my shakes, and they wanted to see if I would shake and live. So I started to go to that meeting regular, and they told me to get a commitment. And after I was there a short length of time, I got to make coffee at one of the meetings. And I'm a guy now, and I was then, when I got a commitment, I committed to it. And if I got a coffee commitment, I don't want you to help me. It's my coffee. It's my commitment. It's my pot. It's my water. You go over there and put the literature out. I'll do the coffee. So I started making coffee at that Tuesday meeting. And the Thursday meeting said, Ed, you know, word's out there up in the foothills, you're making the best coffee around. Would you like to make coffee at our Thursday meeting? And I said, sure. So now I make coffee at 2 meetings. My coffee. I don't care. Those people at Tuesday, I got them broke in. I don't want you people messing with my coffee. Saturday is a speaker meeting. They said, Ed, the word's out. We heard about it in Burbank. You make great coffee, and we need a good coffee maker. Would you make coffee at our meeting? It's a 2-pot meeting. You'll really enjoy it. Oh, yeah, you know. So now I'm making coffee at 3 meetings. Now, to make coffee at 3 meetings, you get a key to the place. So they give you the key. You got to get down there early. You have to open it up. It's a little frosty and cool. You got to get in there and put the wall heaters on. You make the coffee. We had cups. We didn't have styrofoam. We had mugs. Put the mugs out. Put the ashtrays out. You know, do everything. Get it set up. Put the literature out. Do the whole thing. And what would happen is I started to do that, and people would show up early, and they'd start helping me. And they'd help me set up the coffee, and they'd help me do things, and they'd set up, and they'd share their experience, strength, and hope with me. And then when I got to break down the meeting, got to throw the grounds out and clean the pot up and clean the cups and clean the ashtrays and things like that. And a different set of people from that meeting would stay with me, and they'd help clean up with me, and they'd share their experience, strength, and hope with me. Then they'd take me out of that meeting, and they'd take me to one of the restaurants, either to Denny's or to Norm's or to the Verdugo Bowl. And what they'd do, and there was a couple guys like Mike Ross and a couple of them, they would get me in the corner. And the couple would sit here and a couple would sit there. And they would AA me until 2 o'clock in the morning. If I got up to go to the bathroom, one would say, well, I got to go too. I didn't have a chance. Now remember, I got there early, I start making coffee, and I like coffee, so I drink a little coffee, drink a little during the meeting. And if there's any left in the pot, I don't want to waste it, waste not, want not. So I drink a little more coffee, get up to Verdugo Bowl or wherever, drink some coffee till 2 o'clock in the morning. 2 o'clock, they'd all split. I'm wired! I want some action! Bars are closed. Verdugo Bowl's closed. Denny's is closing. So I go home and lay down. And when I got up in the morning, it was actually like I get thrown out of bed, because that coffee was really worked for me. And then I go paint. So now I'm sober a little while, and I'm painting, and I'm finding out I don't like painting. See, I didn't know it when I was drinking. You know? Now I'm sober, and I hate painting. And it's August, there's the San Fernando Valley, and I'm out there with a roller going up and down a wall. I hate painting, I hate painting, I hate painting, you know. And I did, but I go to a meeting. And one of the things I found out in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've always been able to let you know exactly what's going on in my life. I've trusted you people in Alcoholics Anonymous with my life. I've trusted you enough to tell you exactly what's going on, whether you wanted to hear it or not. I would tell you how it is. Don't ever ask me what's going on if you don't want to know. I don't have to take a lot of time to tell you, but I will tell you the truth. And I go to these meetings and I would say, I hate painting, you know. And somebody would say, well, don't worry about it. This too shall pass. But you don't understand. It's hot out there, and I got a T-shirt wrapped over my head like a turban, and it's soaking wet, and you know. And they said, well, don't worry about it. Things will change. So I kept painting, and I kept going to meetings, and I kept being active. And I was about 2 years sober. I got involved in H&I, and I got a panel out at Chino. I started to go to Chino once a month and taking people out there. Now, the interesting thing with me taking people out to Chino is a little period of time there, I didn't have a car. So I'd walk up to you and say, Keith, would you like to go to Chino and speak? Yeah, well, good. Keith, you can pick me up at... I mean, that's the stuff I did, but we always went out there. There was never a black night. We always had that panel to go out there. And I had that for 2 years, and they decided to take it away from me. And I didn't want to let it go. I did not want to let it go. Because what I saw when I went in there, every time I went in there, I saw anywhere from 250 to 300 me's if I take that first drink. Because I'm the type of alcoholic that I drink, I break out in jail. It's just automatic. Somewhere along the line, I'm going to break out and I'm going to be in jail. It's just, I'm a kind of a thief that I will steal something. If it's too big, I'll lay down next to it and claim it, you know? Cops drive by and say, oh, that must be Ed Lynch. You know, wake them up and take them to jail, you know. So I've needed every meeting I've attended, right up until the meeting I just was at earlier. I need my meetings. And you know what? I don't think if I skip 2 or 3 meetings during the week, I don't think I'll drink. But I don't want to get in the habit of not going to meetings. See, this is a good habit. Going to meetings of alcoholics is a good habit because that's where I get information. The information that I didn't have when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous. The information on how not to drink, how you don't drink, the things that you do when your life's upside down, the things that you don't do. When you share those things from the podium or where you share them at a discussion meeting or when you get on the phone and you call me if I'm lucky enough to be your sponsor and you share with me what's going on, all of a sudden I'm getting some kind of information that may hold me in good stead later on down the line when something comes up that's going on in my life and I don't know how to handle it. I get all that information from you people. That's why I go to meetings. That's why I'm active in Alcoholics Anonymous, 37 plus years. God's willing, if I'm willing, I'll be sober 38 years next, And my friend George and Kathy were here earlier at the meeting. I've known them all my sobriety. I've known Keith here about 20-some years. There's people in this room I've known a long time. You get history in Alcoholics Anonymous. Alfred, I've known Alfred forever back there. And it's a good feeling when I walk into a room and I see at least one face of somebody I know from years and years ago that they're still here, they're still doing the deal. They're still going to meetings, they're still active, they're still attending conferences, they're doing all the things that we do. And we aren't a glum lot. We have fun in Alcoholics Anonymous. We have a lot of fun, at least I do. I remember when I was a young kid, they had a movie came out called The Wild One. I saw that movie and boy, I knew I wanted to be a biker. Oh God, I was about 6'2" and weighed about 91 pounds, And I went and bought myself a pair of jeans. I got me a pair of chugga boots. I got me a leather jacket and I wrapped a chain around my waist. And I got on a bus and went downtown. And I did the cool walk up one side of Broad Street, and then I did a cool walk back, And I got on a bus and I went home, you know. And I got off, and just before the stop by my house, because if my dad saw me in that outfit, he'd kick the snot out of me, you know. And I thought, my God, you know, that's what I want to do. And see, when I would drink and I'd get in those bars and I'd talk about all those motorcycles I was going to ride and all those Cadillacs I was going to drive and all that stuff, and you know, but I was always going to do it tomorrow. You know, right now I'm too busy killing myself. Right now I'm too busy slowing down life. Right now I'm too busy being busy doing nothing. And my life was a peeled zero when I got here. And that judge, thank God, out of the kindness of his heart, and I think a little direction from God, sentenced me to Alcoholics Anonymous and gave me a way of life that I never dreamed possible. And the interesting thing is you gave me everything that I need to do it. You gave me the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. You gave me 164 pages and you laid it out completely for me. And in the prefaces it says, "We of Alcoholics Anonymous." That means that I don't have to do this alone. I've never had to do this alone, ever. There's always, I can get on the phone, I can call no matter what the problem is. I remember in '83, they made me the chairman of security up in Bakersfield at the convention. And I was rattled. And I didn't know what to do. And I got on the phone, and I called Keith and said, "I need some help." And all of a sudden, dog on the roof's up there. Bing, just like that. When I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I asked Eddie to sponsor me, and I said to him, "I got to go to meetings, but you know, my transportation is not so good." He had a little old Volkswagen with a hole in the floor. He was schlepping all over the place going to meetings because he had 14 years when I met him. And he's talking all over the place. And we'd be in that little car going to meetings, and at night, you could see the road going like this and a hole in the floor, you know. And I thought, my God, one of these days, you know, my foot's going to go right through it, you know. But and he called me baby. Christ, you know. "Don't worry about it, baby. We're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Here's what you do, baby." Oh, that just didn't set well with me. You know? I'm 6'1" and I'm 135 pounds, and I think I'm a man. "Don't call me baby." I said, "Why do you call me baby?" He says, "Because you are." He says, "You have to take baby steps, Ed. If you want this program," he says, "you got to take it a little bit at a time. You can't get it all at once. It's too much." He says, "If you learn in the first year of Alcoholics Anonymous, if you do what we do, and you take the direction that we give you, that direction will hold you good for the rest of your life in Alcoholics Anonymous, providing you don't try and make changes." You know, I'm the type of guy who, if God would say to me personally, if God would call on me and say, "Ed, here's what we're going to do tomorrow," I would say, "Listen, God, I got another idea." That's the way I am. Thank God I have no idea what's in store for me. A while back, my wife was getting ready to start her treatment for Hep C, and I was beside myself. I spoke up at Big Bear, and I said then that I love her, and I didn't know what the outcome was going to be, but I knew whatever the outcome was going to be, that was what the outcome was supposed to be, and that God was in charge and I wasn't. And I was lucky enough to have a job that I could be with her most of the time. And in the last couple of months, I just took off so I could be with my wife, you know, because I love my wife. And when I'm at a podium and I'm talking and she's sitting in front of me, I can't look at her. I start crying. I'm so grateful that she's in my life. And I'm so grateful that she beat that hepatitis C this time, you know. And the reason I didn't ride my bike up here is because she's not able yet physically to come up on the bike. So we came up in the car, and Keith and his group was kind enough to schlep my bike up here, and they're going to schlep it back, you know. And my friend Smitty will help me, you know. It's just amazing, the things that happen in Alcoholics Anonymous, if you let them happen. If you hold your hand out and say help, or if you hold your hand out and say, "Can I help?" It goes both ways. You got givers, you got takers. And you know, the bottom line is, it seems that the givers are the ones who get more than the takers, which doesn't sound right. It sounds like if you're taking, you're going to be getting, but if you're taking, you're not getting. It's when you're giving that you're getting. It's amazing. It's like when they told me it's easier to stay sober once you've been sober than to get sober. And I thought, well, they're talking in parables, you know. But, you know, I've been around and I've watched these people go out and try and get back. especially when they had long time sobriety and go out and turn their back on a gift that God gave them and then try and get back here. It's tough. And the record isn't too good of the ones get back that stay back. So I'm not going. You know, I might be Irish, but I'm not stupid. You know, I'm not going. I can help it. I'm going to stay here because this is the deal. This is the deal. You know, when I took that first step, I had to admit I was powerless over alcohol and that my life was unmanageable. And I had to realize for me it was a two-part step. My life is unmanageable. Look where I put myself. Look at the things I did to myself. Look the way I acted. You know, my neighbors didn't know I drank until I came sober one day. Oh, this guy's a drunk. Oh, he's sober. They had no idea. But I knew. I knew I was powerless over alcohol. I knew as soon as I took that first drink, that I was off to the races. You know, and my life was unmanageable for the situations I put myself in. I could not put myself in those situations, no matter how hard I tried. You know. And, you know, I'm an alcoholic, but there are drugs in my story. One time I did drugs. I was bartending at a bar in Glendale, and a guy came up to me and asked me if I'd like to enjoy some Thai stick. Now, I have no idea what Thai stick is. To this day, I really don't know what it is. But we went out in the alleyway and we smoked this thing. And I went back in the bar and I sat down, and I don't know how long elapsed, but the guy next to me looks over at me and he says to me, So I said to him, and I'm listening to myself with a and I thought, you know, Ed, you better get out of here. So I left the bar and I got in my car and I'm driving home. And I'm waiting for the light to change, and a guy behind me is just blowing a horn, you know, beep, 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 beep. I was in the middle of the block. Now I got a little perception problem, you know? So I'm going back to my apartment, and I have subterranean parking. And I pull right up there to the car, and all of a sudden I look down and I thought, oh my God. So I'm putting the brakes on, and I'm going to like 15 minutes trying to get down into that garage. And I get down there, you know. And I get in and I go up to my apartment, and I'm laying down in the bed, and all of a sudden this horrendous music starts coming on. It was like a combination of Oriental and Hispanic. It was like, oh, cha, 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 you know. So I go and turn the radio off that isn't on. And it's still going, so I go and I put it in the closet. And I put a couple blankets over it. And I lay back down, and thank God I passed out. And I woke up the next morning, and the statement is true. I said, screw drugs. You know, I mean it. That was my one experience, and I didn't like it. And the reason I didn't like it is I got there too fast. You know? It's like, can you dig it? You know? I like drinking. You get there, you take your time. You got all day. The bar opens at 6 o'clock in the morning. It doesn't close until 2. Not, you know. I love booze. I love what booze did for me. I love the way it smelled. I love the way it tasted. I loved everything about alcohol. But what happened is somewhere along the line, alcohol stopped loving me. And it started to kick my butt. And I started making decisions that weren't cool. Jimmy Taylor calls it, Jimmy T says, you know, I had a good idea. And then I wake up in jail. You know, I used to get those good ideas, you know. I'm sitting in a bar in Elizabeth, New Jersey. sitting in a bar in Elizabeth, New Jersey at 6 o'clock in the morning, making decisions. Now I'm driving a car after making this decision in Elizabeth, New Jersey. I'm driving this car and I look up and there's palm trees. And the sign says, next exit Los Feliz Drive. I drove out here in a blackout from New Jersey. And the guy who came with me said that we stopped in Oklahoma City, and I went into a pawn shop. I had a pinky ring, a diamond ring. I went into a pawn shop to pawn it. The guy wanted to give me $300. I said, no, just give me 50. I'm coming back for it. I haven't set foot in Oklahoma yet. Now, you know I need meetings, you know? So this is what I drug into Alcoholics Anonymous, my sorry butt, you know, and you people give me a good life, you know? So I told you I hated that painting, you know. But what I had to do was, I found out for me, first I had to do is get into the steps. And I had to start applying the steps of my life. And I had to do it with a sponsor. And I had to take a look at that second step. And I had to realize that the insanity for me, it's not the clinical insanity that they talk about. The insanity for this alcoholic is taking that first drink and thinking that I can handle it. That is insane thinking. So I realized that when I knew I couldn't take the first drink, that a little sanity had been restored to me. And if that's all I get, it's okay. That's all I need. I just don't need to take that first drink. And you people shared that with me, and you taught me that. And that third step, you know, I've never had a problem with God. I always knew there was a God. I didn't know anything about him. I told Ed one time, Ed, I says, I don't understand God. He says, don't worry about it. He understands you. And that was good enough for me. I don't have to understand. There is a power greater than myself. If I'm in doubt, all I have to do is look out in this room. This room right now has got a lot more power than I can ever dream of having. And I've tapped into the groups of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's where the power comes from for this alcoholic. I didn't want to do that fourth step. I did not want to do that fourth step. And the reason I didn't want to do it is I read the fifth step. Had to share it with another human being. Statutes of limitations weren't up in some of my stuff, you know? Eddie says, you got to do it. Now, I didn't want to do it with Eddie because I figured if he heard my inventory, he wouldn't like me anymore. There's a guy in Covina named Harvey A. So I cornered him. I said, Harvey, I want to do my inventory with you. He said, when would you like to do it? I said, in about 30 days. He says, have you written? And I says, yeah. He says, we'll do it at your place tomorrow and you'll show up. I says, Harvey, I want to do it in about 30 days. I'm sure you do. You'll be there. And we showed up at my house. My house at that time was a little 8 by 34 foot house trailer. I was living with an alcoholic cat. At least the lady that gave it to me had to be alcoholic. She paid $1,500 for the cat and then had it neutered. So I'm living with this neutered cat. When I went to parochial school as a youngster, they used to say cleanliness is next to godliness. The nuns would say that. Well, in my new sobriety, that trailer wasn't close to cleanliness. There was cat fur all over. There was a ring of it in the toilet. It was on the windowsills. It was on the couches. It was on the table. It was in the sink. It was in the cupboards. It was on the floor. Just cat fur all over the place, you know. I didn't have a vacuum cleaner. I figure eventually I'll get a house and then I'll get a vacuum cleaner. I don't need one in this trailer, for Christ's sake, you know. So now Harvey comes over to my trailer, and I got my inventory out and I'm sharing it with him, and he's giving me permission to share this. And I said, he says to me, Ed, hold it a minute. He says, I once stole a tugboat and took it up the Hudson River in New York. I thought, all right. You know how big a tugboat is? I was impressed. So then I got to tell him a few more things I hadn't written down in my inventory. And what he did is he listened to my inventory, and then he pulled things out that I hadn't put in there, things that I needed to get rid of, things that I didn't need to carry with me the rest of my life in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then the thing that he really did was at the end. He said to me, Ed, I forgive you for all of these things. And he said, God forgives you for all of these things. He says, if you can forgive yourself for these things, they need never have any power over you, and you need never drink at them again. So your job from this point on is to forgive yourself. And if I can forgive you and God can forgive you, then you've got to forgive yourself. And what he did is, by that mere sentences that he gave me, he set me free. He set me on the path to where I could start taking action and doing the things that you have to do. You know, I had to take a look at my defects of character and shortcomings. And I had to kind of put them together and realize that they're mine, I own them, and there's nothing I can do about them but offer them up to the higher power and let him remove them at his convenience, not at mine. Because God, I don't think, ever leaves a vacuum. So I realized, and I asked Eddie, I says, well, what about them? He says, you can't do anything about them, Ed. What you want to do is identify them, own them as your own, and then let God have them, and he'll take them when he's ready. And that's how I did my 6th and 7th step. You know, at 8th step, I made that list. And I set out in the 9th step to do the amends. You know, and some of them quickly, some of them took a long time. I deserted my wife and children in New Jersey in 1963, or 64, something like that, and I came out here to California. And I had 3 children, and I just came out here. You know, my wife gave me alternative, me or the kids, or booze. And there was no question about what was more important to me, and I just walked away from that marriage. And I was out here a short length of time, and I got the word from a friend of mine back in New Jersey called me, and they found my wife stabbed to death. She'd been murdered in Newark. And my thoughts at that time were good. Now I won't have to worry about getting arrested for non-support and stuff like that. And so at about 9 years sober, I had to start clearing up that. So that was an amendment. It took me that long to get on the telephone and call New Jersey to find out how my children were, and if they were alive, and if they were well, and what was going on. And one by one, they started to come into my life. And they moved from the East Coast out here to California. And I got to make amends, and I got to tell them that I was wrong, because Eddie says, you never tell anybody you're sorry. Everybody knows you're sorry, Ed. You could get up at the podium and say, hi, I'm Ed, I'm sorry, and they'll all know it. He says, you got to tell them you're wrong. That's the way you make an amend. You tell them you're wrong. And that hurts, especially if you got to do it the second time to the same person. You know, it gets old. So all of a sudden, you know, those steps started to really take some significance in my life, and I started to realize how important the steps are in the program Alcoholics Anonymous for this alcoholic. You know, that 10th step says, and I saw it through prayer and meditation, you know. No, the 10th step says that I continue to take inventory, and I do. You know, I take that little quiet time, and I look at things, and how was my day? You know, I get up in the morning and take a little time, and how was my night? How was my day going to be? What do I have to do today? You know, the 11 steps sought through prayer and meditation. Well, how do I do that? I do it the easy way. You know, praying is talking to God. And it doesn't have to be Our Fathers and Hail Marys. It can be, hey, God, I got a problem today. And I know you're not going to tell me personally what to do, but if you can give me some kind of guidance, if you can show me, put something in my path, give me some kind of a clue, just so that I know that I'm doing your will. Because, you know, I don't know what your will is. I wouldn't presume to know what your will is, but I want to do your will. So if there's any way you can let me know what your will is, please disclose it to me. And I don't care how, and it gets disclosed to me. I'll go to that morning meeting and somebody will get up there and start sharing something that's going on in their life that's right where I'm at. And all of a sudden I get my answer. That's how God talks to me. God talks to me through you people in Alcoholics Anonymous. God talks to me through those steps. God talks to me through a sponsor. God talks to me through people I don't like in AA, you know? He does. That he really gets my attention. When he says to me, you got to go up and tell him your attitude sucks and you were wrong. You know, God, I hate to do that. I just as soon smack somebody, you know, but can't do that either, you know? So the steps work in my life. And the 12 steps says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, tells me that I have went through those steps in the order that they're laid out, and I'm at that point where I've had that spiritual experience. And the spiritual experience for me is that I'm Ed Lynch and I'm an alcoholic, that I can't drink. And the spiritual experience is for me that you people are going to show me exactly how you don't drink so that I don't have to drink. And you've done that over all these years. You've taken me to all the places that I've been. You know, 4 years sober, I made a 12-step on a guy named Douglas. Douglas was from Yugoslavia. And at that time, when we used to 12-step people, we didn't have the houses and places to take them to. We used to babysit them. My shift with them, because I was a painter, was from 11 o'clock at night until 7 in the morning, and I'd get relieved at 7. And we would take Douglas to a meeting and then get him home. We'd take his shoelaces, take his belt, take his wallet and his shoes, anything that he could hurt himself with or get away, and we would stay there with him. And we'd give him coffee with maybe half a cup of sugar, Carol syrup, orange juice and Carol syrup. That's the wonder we didn't put him in sugar arrest, you know, to keep him from going into the DTs. And after a few days, Douglas got to the point where we could leave him alone. And Douglas would hear me at the meeting saying, I hate painting. See? Because I told you folks what I like and what I don't like. I told you folks what was going on in my life. And Douglas heard me say that. And he came up to me one day and said, Ed, how would you like to get into the car business? And I said, well, what's the big deal about being in the car business, Douglas? He says, you get a brand new free car to drive called a demonstrator. I said, Douglas, I would love to be in the car business. But I said, Douglas, I've been arrested. He said, so have I, Edward. I said, Douglas, I've been arrested more than once. He said, so have I, Edward. I said, Douglas, I did 2 years and a day in the federal penitentiary for car theft. He says, Edward, forget about the car business. So I promptly forgot about it, you know. I guess it was 2, 3, 4 weeks later, I don't know, Douglas came up to me again and he says, Edward, I talked to my boss. He has 7 years in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I told him about you, and he would like to meet you. So I said, all right. And by that time, I had the doctor and Dennis and Kavina had given me some teeth. So I didn't, you know. Hey, don't laugh, especially if you got teeth. I'll tell you what, if you have teeth and then you don't have teeth, and you go from chewing to sucking your food, all of a sudden, when you got teeth again, you know, you look for apples and popcorn and things like that, you know. Try gum and popcorn. Doesn't work, you know. So I had teeth now, and I'm feeling pretty good, and I had a few bucks in my pocket, and I had some decent clothes, and I went down and interviewed. The guy told me, he said, Ed, if you can get a license to sell cars, I'll put you to work selling cars. So I said, okay, how do I do it? And he says, you got to go down to the DMV and you get the paperwork. I went down to the DMV and got the paperwork, and one of the pieces of paper was about this big, and across it says, arrest, date, and disposition. There's a whole bunch of spaces. And I looked at that, and I knew I could probably fill the spaces, but I didn't remember. See, when I was out there causing all that destruction in my life, I didn't know I was going to need to have all that information for my resume. See? So I said to a friend of mine, what do I do? He says, well, go to Van Nuys. And at that time, for $4, you get a copy of your rap sheet. So I went to Van Nuys, got a copy of my rap sheet, and I put everything down on it. And on the bottom, I put down, I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, haven't had a drink or been in jail in 4 years. And honest to God, the state of California issued me a clean license to sell cars. Not a probationary one, a clean one to sell cars. And I still do it today. You know, I still do it today. And that was in 1970. See, you can do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous if you trust God, clean house, and just work your program. Know that God wants only the best for you. It's me that doesn't believe that I deserve things. It's me that thinks that God doesn't really care for me enough because I'm such a bad guy or I'm such a bad person. God loves me. God has given me his whole kingdom when I really take a look at it, because all I can have is what I can see. Right now I see it in this room. I see Alcoholics Anonymous at work in this room. And Alcoholics Anonymous is my life. I've never had it so good. I don't want to go back to that, sitting in that bar with that towel in the morning trying to get that drink to stay down. I don't want to do that. You know, I don't want to be one of those people that's not responsible anymore, you know. I don't want to be the guy who turns my back on my wife or on my friends or on Alcoholics Anonymous or on the higher power. So I stay tuned in here. I still stay involved with the steps. I love taking my guys through the steps because what happens is I get to go through them again. I get to go through them again and again and again. I hang out at a place called the Fellowship Center. The reason I hang out there is I get new guys. The reason I get new guys is I don't want to forget. I want to stay green. I want to remember where I came from. And what better way can I remember where I came from 37 years later is some poor drunk shaking one out, looking up at me and saying, what do I do now? You know, where it's very apparent to me what he should do, but he has no idea. And I give him two options. They both amount to the same thing. And he does it, and he calls me sponsor and thanks me. Can't get much better than that. It can't get much better than that. Nobody wanted me around it for. The only people that ever wanted me back, there was a warrant attached to it. That was it, you know. You know, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous with a lot of, you know, old ideas and a lot of bad information that I thought was good information. You know, and I came in with a lot of old ideas. One of my old ideas, I'll share with you, when I was a young guy, I had acne. I had terminal acne. My acne had acne. I couldn't pull a turtleneck over my face for fear of ruining a turtleneck. I mean, I had bad acne. And my dad would say, do not, under any circumstance, pick those or you'll have a crater face. So I didn't. And I mean, I had it, and I went to school with it. I went to Catholic school. And I know my dad used to drink at a bar called Glacken's back in Elizabeth. And he got paid every 2 weeks, and my mother would send me down to get him from the bar, you know, before he spent all the check. And we leave the bar, and we get on the bus and go home. One time I'm holding on to the strap on the bus, and my dad's sitting there, and he's about half in his cups. And he looks up at me with all these pimples on my face, and he says to me, if you quit playing with yourself, you wouldn't have those pimples. I stopped for 2 weeks. Didn't help. So I took the situation in hand. But the point is, what's the point? I'd be sitting in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and somebody would come in with an acne and I'd think, ha! Old idea. Had a lot of old ideas. Eddie told me I had to get rid of those old ideas. My sponsor, Harry, 47, 48 years in the program, says you gotta get rid of those old ideas. My sponsor's got almost 50 years. He's coming close to 50 years. Still sweeps up floors, still pours coffee at the meetings, still is active in Alcoholics Anonymous. I want what he has. I want what he has. You know? Where else do you get it but here in Alcoholics Anonymous? And what do you have to do for it? Read the book, go to meetings, get a sponsor, keep your sobriety date. Keep your sobriety date. You know, when I was 2 years sober, I was having a problem understanding what they call the progression of the disease. I didn't understand it. I could not, for the life of me, understand if I'm not drinking, how is this disease progressing in me? It just did not make sense to me. And I asked God, I said, you know, I believe Alcoholics Anonymous, I believe what I've learned, I believe everything that's happened in my life, but I just cannot quite grasp how this can happen, this progression of the disease. And my higher power loves me. I got a 12-step call. A doctor, been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous 7 years. Hugh Gaffney. I went to his place around 6 in the morning. I'm a great 6 o'clock in the morning guy. And I opened up the door, and boy, I knew I was home. It stunk. It was bad. And I got him up, and I got him in the shower, and I tried to shave him, and I got to rinse it off, and he still had whiskers. He shook so much, it was kind of hard to shave somebody when they're moving, you know. Gave him some soup, and he puked. I gave him some more soup, and he puked. Stopped giving him soup, he stopped puking, you know. Didn't know what to do with the guy, and I called Barbara and said, well, I'm over here now, what should I do? She said, well, take him to the noon meeting. So I get him out of the house and take him to the noon meeting, and He's telling me all day long. Oh, and what he did is he had the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he told me that the big book was poorly written, the steps were in the wrong sequence, and he was upset with the book, so he took his pistol out and shot the book. When I got there, the book was laying dead on the floor in his apartment with a bullet hole in it, you know. So I take the guy and I take him to the noon meeting. When the noon meeting's over, I said to Barbara, now what do I do with him? Because I want to get rid of him. This guy was telling me all this stuff about the book not being right, about the program not working. And I'm thinking, my God, you know, this guy's got to be educated. If he's a doctor, it means he had to go to high school, you know, probably college, maybe medical school. I've got an 8th grade education. Maybe I wasted 2 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. But thank God for commitment. I made a commitment to do what they asked me to do, is take them to a meeting. And then she asked me to take them to a meeting that night, and I made another commitment, so I took them to another meeting. And on the way, I picked up a guy named Duke. Duke been in and out of AA. I said, Duke, are you going to meetings? He says, yeah. I said, I'm going tonight. I've got a doc. Would you like to go with me? He says, sure. So now I got Duke and a doc, and I take him to a meeting. We get to the meeting, and the meeting's over. I says to another lady I knew, Dorothy, I says, Dorothy, she's an old timer in Pasadena. I says, you know, I've told her my story. I had him all day and I don't know what to do. She said, I know a doctor in Arcadia. And she gave me the number. I called the doctor up. I says, doctor, I got this doctor with me. And, you know, I had him all day and I don't know what to do and I don't want to take him back to where he was. And, you know, and he says, I'll come and I'll help you. So now Duke and I and the doc are in the car. And this is my first fairly new car. It was a Mercury station wagon. And Duke's sitting next in the back and Doc's sitting alongside of me, and we're in Pasadena waiting for the other doctor to show up, and all of a sudden the doctor in my car goes into convulsion and he dies. And I look over and I says to Duke, we gotta get the doc out of the car. He says, what do you mean? I said, we gotta get him out of the car, because I was afraid that with the dead doctor in the car, they'd impound my car, you know? It's the truth. So he says, well, what do you want to do? I said, get him out of the car. He says, he's dead. I said, I know he's dead. He ain't going to complain, you know? So we take him out, we put him on the sidewalk. The other doctor comes, they get on the phone, they call, the paramedics come, and, you know, they pronounce him dead, put him in the body bag, take him away. Starting to get an idea that maybe this is a progressive disease. So Duke says to me on the way back, I'm never going to drink again. And Eddie had get me out talking 10-minute talks here and 10-minute talks there, you know, when I was a couple of years sober. So they asked me to talk in a meeting over in Pasadena. It'd be the 10-minute speaker, and Duke put him up to it. So I go there and I do my little 10-minute talk, and I'm looking around, as you know, and I don't see Duke anywhere. So finally I said to the guy, I says, secretary, I said, you know, I know Duke put you up to this. I said, but where is he? He said, you didn't hear? I said, no. He says, he drank over the holidays and he choked to death in his own puke. So I'm starting to get an idea, you know, maybe this is a progressive disease, but I'm not convinced. I told you, I'm Irish, I'm not convinced. So God says, all right, I have this H&I commitment, and one of them was going down to the Los Angeles hospital. Well, I go down there. We're putting on a panel in the afternoon. I walk in the alcohol ward, and on the way in, out in the hallway, is a guy laying in a straitjacket on a gurney. And I walked by him and hit him on the chest and said, just out there having fun, huh, fella? I walked into the meeting, and I thought, God, that's tacky, Ed. You're feeling good, you're sober, and this poor guy's shaking one out. Men's time. Back out, and I go up to him and I said, God, I'm sorry, we're going to have a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Would you like to come to the meeting? He says, no, I don't want to go to AA. I said, have you ever been to AA? He says, yeah, I was sober 20 years in AA. I said, what? Yeah, he said, what? He said, yeah, I was sober 20 years in AA. He's telling me this in a straitjacket. I'm having a conversation with a guy in a straitjacket, right? 20 years? Yeah, 20 years. What happened? I drank. Why'd you drink? I thought it was a good idea at the time, you know. But here's the one that got me. When did you start drinking? 5 days ago. 20 years, 5 days, hospital, straitjacket, gurney. I'm convinced. I'm convinced that it is a disease, and I am convinced that it just sits there and waits. It's patient, it's cunning, baffling, powerful, and they should have put in patient. They shouldn't have. That's written the way it's supposed to be. I would probably like them to put in patient. To me, it is a progressive disease. I don't care if anybody in this room thinks it. I do. I believe it is a progressive disease, and I believe that my whole sobriety is contingent on my spiritual condition and that I don't take that first drink. And the way I don't take that first drink is doing the things that I've mentioned tonight that I do over and over, and I'm excited about Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know what? I need Alcoholics Anonymous more now than when I came in, because when I came in, I had no idea what you people had to offer. I didn't have a clue what Alcoholics Anonymous had to offer. Now I know what it has to offer. It has life, it has experiences, it has fun, it has tears, it has pain, but all of those things I get to experience on the natch. I don't have to use drugs or alcohol, you know? I met my wife at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. If I hadn't been at that meeting, was one of my regular meetings, I wouldn't have met Lori. And Lori wouldn't be in my life today. So I never know what's in store for me. You know, I believe she's a gift in my life. See, since I've been in Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been married, you know? You know what? I am married. I used to tell you I'm married, but I want to look available. You know how that goes? I'm not like that. I am married. She is my wife. And that's all I want in my life. That's all I want. Is Lori in my life as my wife. The other things just take care of themselves, you know? I love her. I'm not afraid to tell the whole world that I love her. And I am so glad that God took that hepatitis C and just zapped it, you know, and it was tough. And I'm so proud of her for going through it and not quitting. I've seen so many people quit before the treatment's over because it just kicks butt. You know, it just kicks butt. And I'm glad that God allowed me to be able to be there with her as much as I was, that financially we were able to do it, that I took off the last couple of months. You know, and I'm glad that I know how to paint, believe it or not. I'm a car salesman, and when I tell you what, on the side I still paint houses. And I like that. Uncle Sam doesn't get to participate. You know? That's the way it goes, you know? I want to thank everybody for being here, for being patient, for allowing me to share my experience, strength, and hope with you. I want you to know that I love you. I want you to know I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I want you to know that I know God loves me, or he wouldn't allow me to stay here this long. He wouldn't expose me to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. If I got what I deserved, I'd still be doing time. See, I was facing 7.5 to 15. I've done that twice here. I'm going on the third time around on that 15, if I lived that long. It's so much. This is an easier, softer way. Alcoholics Anonymous, no matter what, all the stuff that Lori and I went through, this is the easier, softer way. Because, see, we wouldn't be at the point where we are tonight if we didn't love Alcoholics Anonymous. And I say we because it says that in the preface. We of Alcoholics Anonymous. It doesn't say I or me of Alcoholics Anonymous. It says we. And I have to believe that. So I want to thank you for my life. I want to thank again the committee for allowing me to come here and share with you. And you guys have a wonderful convention. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.